Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going hunting for XERNEAS in the Open Master League with my newly level 50'd Perfect IV Gengar. Gengar is a Ghost and Poison type Pokemon with the moveset of Shadow Claw, Legacy Shadow Punch, and I'm running Sludge Bomb so I can hit XERNEAS for super effective damage. Despite the fact that Gengar is a wall to XERNEAS' energy, Gengar is so glassy that a Moonblast still does well over half of its HP. All things considered, this is not a Pokemon that you should run in Masters, but I did not let that stop me. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Gengar in the Open Master League. Picking up a great lead in the first match, Rayquaza into Giratina Origin. Opponent safe switches into Excadrill, and I have a great response available with XERNEAS. Opponent farming up a ton of energy, it's important that I let them throw first. Once I tank a drill run, then I can start to go for the close combats. In this situation, I do throw on alignment. If I try and go for good timing, I can end up going over 100 energy, so either way, if it's going to be less than ideal, I may as well just get the move off. My opponent shields, I shield back, and I'm going for close combat number 2. Decision time for the Exca. Exca commits the shield, they go for the drill run, giving me an entire Geomancy for free. That's not really going to affect the outcome of this matchup, however. I can still throw 3 Geomancies, go for the close combat, and this will secure the KO. My defense is at -4, so my opponent is going to be able to send in the Giratina and be able to farm me down, but honestly, that's okay. I have switch advantage, and I can send back in Rayquaza. Rayquaza is going to be hit with the charge move from the Giratina. Giratina goes for the Shadow Ball. I continue to farm up. In the back, they have XERNEAS, and this is exactly what I'm hunting for with Gengar. Gengar has the triple resist on the close combat and resist in the Moonblast, but that does not look very resisted. Look at the damage. Oh my goodness. Gengar so glassy, but the Sludge Bomb does massive damage to the XERNEAS. Gengar gets the farm down, leaving with the Shadow Punch loaded. Shadow Punch into the Giratina is going to connect onto the Giratina, and I come back in with Rayquaza with the Breaking Swipe loaded. Breaking Swipe takes down Giratina, and that's a good game. Hopping into the next match, picking up a positive lead, Rayquaza into Ho-Oh. Opponent is staying in this matchup, and if they do, I like to just overfarm like crazy. A Breaking Swipe, of course, is not going to threaten a KO, so I'm just going to commit a shield and look to massively overfarm. They go for the Sacred Fire, they get the debuff, they're staying in, and I'm just going to go for the Dragon Ascent. Breaking Swipe, of course, won't come close to KOing, but a Dragon Ascent, even when debuffed, definitely will. Down goes Ho-Oh. Opponent sends in XERNEAS, and I'm going to mirror. I'm hoping that my opponent is going to switch out of this matchup, and that way I can hopefully align the Gengar onto their XERNEAS in the endgame. They go for the Moonblast, I'm farming up, and I'm going for a Moonblast of my own. This, of course, will not KO. This is a mirror match, but it will do a very nice amount of damage as the opponent lets it through. I'm farming up, going for the close combat, but my opponent has the level 51 XERNEAS. They have the best buddy equipped, so they will always win CMP. I now send in Gengar into the XERNEAS in the back. Opponent has a Giratina Origin, and this game is winnable. Shadow Punch into the Giratina will be shielded. Back in comes Rayquaza, and Rayquaza will immediately apply a debuff with a Breaking Swipe. Breaking Swipe will be shielded by the Giratina. I continue to farm with Rayquaza, and this will be interesting. I think I'm going to save the shield for Gengar. Shadow Ball gets Rayquaza low. Rayquaza able to make it to the Breaking Swipe. Breaking Swipe into the Giratina will secure the KO. Back in comes the XERNEAS. In comes the Gengar. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We see a terrible lead in the next match, Rayquaza into XERNEAS. I'm going to save switch into my own. My opponent is going to stay in this matchup, because if they throw the Moonblast as soon as they get there, since switch takes a turn, I will always be 1 Geomancy behind in this matchup. My opponent now sends in Groudon, and this is actually perfect, as I need to bait out the Groudon, as Groudon would absolutely slaughter my Gengar. Opponent only has 6 punch shots here. This is not enough for a Precipice Blades. It's just a Fire Punch. I am able to live that on 1 HP and go for the close combat. Close combat does not get the KO. Speaking of 1 HP, Gengar is able to survive. The moment XERNEAS comes in, I'm going to be sending in the Gengar. Opponent sends in the XERNEAS. Switch clocks are misaligned. I'm sending in the Gengar, and I'm going for the Sludge Bomb. And since Switch takes a turn, this should be a CMP tie. Sludge Bomb will be shielded. It's the CMP tie. We've already seen that Moonblast, even when resisted, does massive damage, so I will commit a shield. In the back, it's Lugia, and this is a situation where I definitely wish I had Shadow Ball. A Shadow Punch is a pretty weak move. Even though it hits for super effective damage, Lugia is extremely bulky. Lugia able to withstand that damage. I'm going for another Shadow Punch. Opponent firing off energy, and the fact that they didn't commit to the farm down maybe gives me a win con. I'm going to send in Rayquaza. I'm shielding nothing, and I'm committing to an incredibly aggressive farm down. My goal is just exit this matchup with a shield and a bunch of energy, and then hopefully I can get a win. It all comes down to this. I build up to the Dragon Ascent, bait with the Breaking Swipe, and the opponent shields. Rayquaza looking to close out this game and will be able to do just that. Thanks to the bait, Rayquaza makes it to the Dragon Ascent and secures the win. Picking up a slightly positive lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Dragonite. We will have identical pacing, but Rayquaza, of course, is able to win the CMP tie. Opponent plays to the CMP tie, correctly anticipating that I'm going for the Breaking Swipe as soon as I get it. Breaking Swipe will be shielded by my opponent, and I'm going to be shielding back. Rayquaza is going to be able to make it to another Breaking Swipe, so the opponent is going to switch out into Mewtwo, and Mewtwo save switch is a big problem for this team. Mewtwo now one away from the back-to-back Psy Strikes. This means I will get outpaced before I make it to the Moonblast, so I go for a bit of an unorthodox play. I go for the resisted close combat. Opponent, doubting their counts, commits the shield, and now, honestly, I'm in a better spot than I was. My opponent has a ton of energy on the Mewtwo. Mewtwo will go for the Psy Strike. I send in Rayquaza, opponent throws on alignment, and I'm able to get an entire Dragon Tail for free. And that Dragon Tail is very impactful, as now I'm going to be able to overfarm, go for the Breaking Swipe, and Breaking Swipe will actually be able to KO the Mewtwo. In the back, opponent has Melmetal, and unfortunately this is going to be game over for me, as Melmetal is not something that Gengar can handle without Focus Blast. Back in comes the Dragonite. I'm able to make it to the Sludge Bomb. Shadow Punch definitely would not KO here. Sludge Bomb will secure the KO. Back in comes the Melmetal. Melmetal firing off energy. Can I even tank a Rock Slide as a Gengar? I definitely cannot tank that. It's a Flash Cannon, and I resign the match. We're now 3-1 in the set, looking for the 4-1, picking up a pretty decent lead, Rayquaza into Landorus. In this matchup, Landorus is able to outpace unless you throw your charge move as soon as you get there, and honestly, throwing on alignment here ends up being worth it, because due to the debuff, you're able to a lot more comfortably tank a Stone Edge. But my opponent not only stays in this matchup, but also shields. This clues me into the fact that they might be weak to Rayquaza in the back, and if that's the case, then I probably want to shield. So I do shield. My opponent is double shielding in the lead matchup. I've now double debuffed them, so I should be able to tank this. Opponent goes for the Stone Edge. They now send in Dialga, and I'm going to respond with XERNEAS. Farming up energy with the XERNEAS. Opponent is going to wait for me to throw. They're waiting for me to close combat, so that way they can get a KO with their Iron Head, but I'm going to go for the Moonblast. So this way, my opponent, when they go for the Iron Head, it's not going to be enough to KO. I'm going to be able to withstand this damage, and then just go for the close combat, as I want to make sure that I get rid of them before they make their second Iron Head. Close combat will secure the KO. In the back, it's Zekrom, and XERNEAS able to make it to a last second charge move. It's no Moonblast, but a close combat does quite a bit of damage. And now I'm able to send in Gengar. Gengar farming up. As you can see, these Dragon Breaths are absolutely shredding Gengar. Crunch will be shielded. Thankfully, no debuff. I build up to the Sludge Bomb. I'm going for the Shadow Punch here. Is this going to be enough to KO? It is not. In comes the Landorus into the loaded Shadow Punch from the Gengar. Shadow Punch will secure the KO. All that's left in the back is the low health Zekrom. Gengar KOs the Zekrom, and we get the 4-1 set. We see a tough Mon on the lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Solgaleo. Solgaleo has play into this entire team, so this is really not ideal. Solgaleo is going to be firing off the Psychic Fangs. I'm going to let that through. I'm going to build all the way up to the Dragon Ascent and then go for the Breaking Swipe. Breaking Swipe will apply a very important attack debuff onto the Solgaleo. Solgaleo is just going to keep firing off these Psychic Fangs, continuing to chip away at my defense stat. I'm farming up with Rayquaza. Rayquaza making it to the Dragon Ascent on the CMP tie, and this will be lethal. Decision time for the opponent. They let it go. Down goes Solgaleo. In comes Yveltal, and I need to stay in here and let myself get farmed down, so that way I can align it onto XERNEAS. XERNEAS farming up energy here. Let's see, are they running Oblivion Wing? Yes, they are running Oblivion Wing. I continue to farm up with the XERNEAS, and I'm going for the Moonblast. Moonblast will just one-shot the Yveltal here. Yveltal is forced to commit the shield. These Geomancies are eating away at Yveltal's health. Yveltal getting close to half health. But the issue is, due to their energy lead, they're probably going to be able to outpace me, so I believe I'm going to need to go for a close combat bait. Oblivion Wing is shielded. It's the CMP tie. I need my opponent to shield here. Close combat is going to be shielded. I'm farming up with the XERNEAS. Opponent goes for a switch into Rayquaza, and I'm going for the Moonblast, but this is going to be tough. My opponent is going to get one shot, but they have energy on Yveltal. I go for the catch onto the Gengar, and I do not get the catch, and my opponent just has too much energy here. They go for Oblivion Wing. That leaves the Gengar on 1 HP, but Shadow Punch will not KO. And now they have the Oblivion Wing loaded to KO the XERNEAS. XERNEAS had so much play in the back, but by failing the catch onto the Gengar, unfortunately, we do not win the game. Moving into the next match, we see a familiar lead Rayquaza into Ho-Oh. Same game plan as always. I'm just going to look to overfarm a massive amount of energy on Rayquaza. My opponent is doing the same. They farm all the way up to 100, so I'm just full sending the Dragon Ascent here. Dragon Ascent gets the one shot. They lose 100 energy. They bring in XERNEAS. I send in my own, and the opponent concedes the match without even seeing Gengar. We see a very tough lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Melmetal. I'm going to save switch into XERNEAS, and the Melmetal is staying in this matchup, and they have farmed up to a potential Flash Cannon. I'm not going to respect it, and they have it. So things going from bad to worse in this matchup, as Flash Cannon Melmetal beats this entire team. Close combat will be shielded. I wait a turn to make sure they don't catch on like a flying type or a Giratina, and I go for close combat number 2. My opponent is going to get a farm down here, which is really not ideal. I send in Rayquaza, and my goal is to shield the Flash Cannon and hopefully farm up a ton of energy. My opponent baits with a superpower. They now send in a Gyarados, so my opponent is running a budget team, but unfortunately for me, I have the most budget Pokemon of them all, the level 50 Gengar in the back. It's highly likely they have something like a Dragonite in the back, like a Melmetal Double Flyer, and in that case, I just lose. I do not have a win con against that team. I send in the Gengar, I can't get the farm down, Gyarados living on 1 HP, Aquatail does half of my health, Gengar is so glassy, and in the back, it's Dragonite, and unfortunately, even with a banked Breaking Swipe, I do not have a win con here. Sludge Bomb is shielded up by the Dragonite, and I resign the match. Picking up a slightly positive lead in the next match, Rayquaza into Dragonite. Opponent staying in this matchup, and this works out pretty nicely for me, as Dragon Breath would absolutely obliterate the poor Gengar in the back. Breaking Swipe will be shielded. Opponent looking to massively overfarm, and honestly at this point, I'm just going to take the shield advantage and go for energy on XERNEAS. XERNEAS with an energy lead is very scary. Opponent is now going to send in Groudon, and speaking of scary, this is not what I was hoping to see whatsoever. As once Rayquaza is gone, my backline gets absolutely stomped by Groudon. I'm farming up a ton of energy here with the XERNEAS, and I will commit a shield as Groudon will fire off the Precipice Blades. Here's where having the shield advantage will come in clutch, and now I can go for the close combat. This will be lethal. Opponent is going to let it go, and down goes Groudon. In the back, it's Metagross. Wait, is this game winnable? I'm farming up, and I am firing off the Shadow Punch with the Gengar. Shadow Punch will be shielded up by the Metagross. I continue to farm with the Gengar. Opponent does have energy on the Dragonite. I'm predicting they're going to make a switch, so I blind throw the Shadow Punch. In comes the Dragonite, but they do not get their energy as Shadow Punch gets the KO. Back in comes the Metagross, and Metagross is just not able to farm down. Gengar so glassy, but able to withstand the bullet punches and get the KO onto Metagross. We see a nightmare lead in the final match, Rayquaza into Togekiss. I'm going to save switch into XERNEAS, and my opponent is staying in with the Togekiss. If they're staying in, I'm going to look to desync the switch timers here by firing off the Moonblast. That does quite a lot of damage. Opponent now going to send in Kyogre. Kyogre will be hit with a Moonblast as well. Moonblast going to deal some very nice damage onto Kyogre. Kyogre continuing to farm. Opponent lets me get to this close combat, which means I can guarantee switch advantage or a shield. Opponent just gives up switch, and they send in Rayquaza. And now, things are looking pretty good for me here, as I'm going to be able to align the Togekiss onto Gengar, and Gengar is going to be resisting the charms. Well, to be fair, Resisting charms by Gengar standard, they still look super effective, but still, hey, at the very least, I can take charms better than I can take them on the Rayquaza. I lag there so I don't get my fast move through, but I'm just gonna let this go and trust in the Gengar. In comes the Gengar, Gengar gets the farm down, in comes the Togekiss, and Togekiss is just out of options as Gengar is able to make it to the back-to-back Shadow Punches, and the opponent realizes that it's over, and they let the move go. All in all, I had a ton of fun getting to run Gengar. As I mentioned, the first set that I tried with it, I went 4-1. So I was like, wow, this worked way better than I expected. Understandably, the next sets after did not go nearly as well, but still, a 4-1 with a Master League Gengar over 3000 ELO, I'm very proud of, as that was definitely not an easy thing to accomplish. Gengar, definitely a meme pick. As I mentioned, it just has no bulk whatsoever. However, if Mega Master League does return in the future, Mega Gengar does have some pretty nice play there. It is generally outclassed by the Primals just because the Primals are absolutely broken, but Mega Gengar can be a very good raid attacker as well, so even if you're not necessarily looking at it from a Master League perspective, because in Master League, it's just really too glassy to amount to anything, from a raid perspective and potentially from a Mega Master League perspective, if that format returns, it is very interesting. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.